Hello, here we are at the new series called You and God. There are four things going to be talked about here. What is submission? The next lesson will be what is spiritualism? The next lesson will be what is salvation? And then the fourth lesson will be what is sanctification? And you will be surprised they will not be what you think. So let's begin here with our subject. What is submission? Now take a look at the word, and you'll see there are basically two words inside submission. Well, let me tell you something. It is not what most people think. Sub means to be under, and the mission means that you're making it your mission. So let's take a look. Actually, it means. Let's define it. And here's the problem with definitions. When we use definitions we have today for a word that is in the Bible, we're using it wrongly. We have to be able to allow God to give his own definition, and it is locked in time according to the time in which it was given. For example, the word slavery. Many people are confused about the word slavery because they think, how can a God be content with people being in slavery? Well, he never was. However, he uses the word slavery in the Bible. Yes, he does. But slavery never meant to be owned by another person. That was bondage. Every time they were in Egypt, every time they were in sin, he talks about them being in bondage. That means totally owned. Whenever he talks about slavery in the Bible, he's talking about an indentured servant, one who sold himself for a time to pay a debt he could not pay. Okay? And when he tells us we are in slavery to righteousness, meaning we have sold ourselves purposely to pay the debt we could not pay. And we are choosing to enslave ourselves for that. We're not in bondage. Bondage is to sin, slavery to righteousness. You see the difference? Now, let's talk about some of our words we use today, like submit. That's what we're talking about. Like swipe. The word swipe has changed tremendously. You go into the store, and they used to say, "Hey, buddy, you going to swipe that?" It meant, "Are you going to steal it?" Today they say, "Are you going to swipe that?" It means, "Are you going to pay for it with a card?" Two totally different meanings, same word. That's why we have translations that are at different ages and times, because the words in the English language change. And so it makes it difficult to understand something that has happened in the past, or the wordage or the word pictures that God uses. For example, we say things like, I got up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. Well, there is no wrong side of the bed. You can even crawl off the end if you want. What we're saying is it's a word picture saying we got up angry or upset or unhappy or whatever. So you see, these things are important when we're defining words God uses for us to have in everyday life. Now, what does submission mean? Here's what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you are boss and control of somebody else, which usually in the marriage, people think that the husband says, "I'm the boss, woman, you've got to submit to me." That is not what it says. In fact, later it even says, "You submit to her, she submits to you." We're talking about a purpose of submission. What is the point of submitting? Okay? So, is it slavery? Our word we use today. Is it something where we're totally trapped and we can't get out of having to do this? No, no, not at all. Submission means you're making your mission to do it. Well, what about uh, everybody's pushing you until finally you have to submit to it? next situation. We're going to define it even more. Take a look. See this picture here? Now I want you to ignore the two circles that are above and below the line. You see this one here, it's above, and this one down here. Just ignore those for a minute. And let's talk about these which are right here, all right up against that line. And here's what God says. He has created all mankind equal. Now that's what makes us unique here in the United States, because the United States considers all mankind equal, which, by the way, can only come from the Word of God, the Bible. It cannot come from any other writings, because of the fact that other writings do not allow man to be equal to each other. And many times women aren't equal to men, and so on. And people have used the Bible to say, look, women aren't equal to men, and look how men are supposed to beat on women, and so on. That's not true. Look at that. Do you see genders up there? Do you see color? Do you see nationality? Do you see languages? No. Everybody is equal in God's sight. And you should consider that as well. It should be in your sight as well. Now, because we're equal, this is why we can't murder each other. That's why it's wrong for me to murder you. This is what they're doing in the realm of the womb. They're saying, well, that child's not born yet. However, geography is not the point. Whether they're inside or outside the womb is not the point. And every single time in the Bible, when God talks about a woman being pregnant, he does not use the word pregnant. He says with child. That's very important to understand, because he differentiates there. And he's wanting to make sure you understand that child is equal to the adults. The difference is that they're not ready to be on their own because they're in such needy condition. So equality is important. However, there are positions and so on and so forth. We'll talk about that in a minute. You can consider yourself not equal to others and say, you know what, I'm just not capable of being like everybody else, and I can't do that, and God didn't make me where I could be a good human being, and I'm just not. But that's not what God said. In fact, God said, as we covered in the last series on the new year, the new you, how God made you with incredible potential and made you where you could be as great or greater than anybody else. This is not about that. It's about that you are equal in value to God. Remember, don't find your value in yourself or in what other people think. Find your value in what God has done. And here's the answer to that. Christ died once for all. So if Christ died once for all, then you're equal to everybody else. And the only difference is how you think about it. At the same time, if someone decides, you know what, I'm going to make laws everybody must abide by, they must do, then they're saying, you know who I am? I'm God. And I'm going to tell you what to do. Now see, neither one of those are in the definition of submission. And here's the issue. Because of submission is necessary in the fact that we have to have these different areas where we're to be led and where we're to follow. So submission, the definition again, to make it your mission to be under one, you have given permission to be over you in a certain area. Let's take a look again. There is equality under God. No one is above or below anyone else. Everybody is inferior and superior in different ways. When you look at other people, it is not what they think that matters, it is what you think of yourself that matters. And let me tell you something. This is very important, because what you believe to be true drives your behavior. Okay? If you think you're less, Solomon says, you're right, you are less. If you think you're greater, you're right, you think you are greater. If you realize you're equal to other people, then you're not only right, but you're right with God. And the key about this under God thing is that when we're wanting to do what is right, we have to turn to God and know the answers we can't know on our own. We just can't. We're exposed to both good and evil, and we don't know which one is true. So we turn to God. He's recorded. He's made sure we could know. Okay? Now, notice too that equality means no one can establish rights but God. All the rights people have are because God set the laws of mankind when He created them. From the beginning of time, He made Adam and Eve. He made mankind. In other words, from this kind will come other men, other people, other mankind. And Adam and Eve were equal. And when they both sinned, they got the equal punishment. And if they didn't sin, they would have had the equal reward. Equality is important. However, rights are from God. In fact, our Declaration of Independence, which can also be termed the Declaration of a New Nation, says our inalienable rights come from God. They cannot come from man, and therefore man cannot take them away. This is the problem we get into when we look at the governments. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But all equality and rights come from God. Now let's take a look. Equality is indeed a sacred charge from God. For you have to realize that the other person is equal to you and you are equal to them, and that is a sacred charge. To think any other way is to think the lies of Satan. Now that's going to matter when we look at the order of submission. What is God's order of submission? What are you talking about, submission? If we're all equal, what does that mean? God made leaders and followers. In every area of life, God has set down the rules of how it's to be done so that there's order. God's a God of law and order. He's the one who loves order and loves the law. And He set it down so that there would be this peace. Now, the reason there are leaders and followers is, what if you had all followers? Who would lead? Well, if you had all leaders, who would follow? And so He set down in every sphere of government who was supposed to do what and when. Now notice, God also made genders and roles. In other words, He made male and female. It says in the beginning of Genesis and that He made male and female. Male and female made them Him. He made male and female, and when He did that, He said, this is mankind. I'm making it in two phases. What phases? The male and the female. And here's the key: when they get married and they cleave together and they have sex, they are one. One what? One mankind. They're mankind. They're a complete unit. Because of that, they are uniquely different in physical structure. They are also uniquely different in roles and responsibilities. And God designed them that way. Here's a good way if you want to determine whether what I've just told you is right. Go down to the hospital and go in there and say, you know what? I have heard that there are 32 genders. At least that's what they're telling me right now. I think now they have an X, which means to Xfinity. And I want to know, what are the tests for the other 30 genders? Can you show me what the blood tests are for the other 30 genders? And they'll say, well, I'm sorry, there's only male or female. And that's exactly right. And no matter what a person does to their body, or wears, or acts like, their blood tells they are either male or female, and God will hold them responsible for that in the day of judgment. It's that simple. Now, let's talk about these roles. And God has specifically told us about what the family role is supposed to be and how it's supposed to be done. Notice that if we're going to do as Christ said, then we're going to follow it in His fashion, and the husband's going to do certain things, the wife's going to do certain things, and the children have to do certain things, and they're doing that because that is the biblical order of the family, according to God. Okay, let's take a look now at what the husband's supposed to do. He's supposed to protect the family. He's supposed to provide for the family. His job is to go out and get busy and make money to provide for them because he's taken on that responsibility. What makes that his responsibility? He's supposed to lead the family. However, leading the family does not mean beating the family or pushing the family or owning the family. It means he leads. And good leaders are always out front. What's he supposed to lead them to? Christ. That's what his responsibility is. Lead the family by providing and protecting them in this world, but lead them spiritually. And if he does that, then he's doing what God has told him to do. Now, the wife, however, has to say, you know what? I see your roles, and they're not my roles. And I'm going to submit to those roles. I'm going to make it my mission to be under you, and I'm giving you permission to be over me. You know why? Because we're equal. And so I have to do this. And if I want to follow Christ. Well, then look at the wife. The wife is sitting there, and what does she have to do? She has to nurture and comfort and teach. Teach what? Teach Christ. See? And in that area, she has to submit herself to that, because those are the rules she's going to be responsible for in the day of judgment, not the man. Now, does the man teach? Yes. Does the man nurture and comfort? Yes. Does the wife also help in these areas? Yes. But she is not the leader in the husband's roles, and the husband's not the leader in the wife's roles. And those roles they will be responsible for in the day of judgment, because God set the genders and the roles from the beginning of time. Now let's talk about the children. The children can be either male or female. Doesn't matter, because their position is they have to love their parents and they have to obey their parents. Now, isn't that interesting? You can see a lot of children who love their parents because their parents give them stuff and feed them and all that sort of stuff. But not many of them obey their parents. And yet, they're supposed to. Why? Because you've only got about 18 years to turn a barbarian who only wants what he wants and is going to hit, kick, scream, bite, whatever, to get what he wants, into a good citizen and a citizen of heaven as well. And how do you do that? You teach them. Now, let me tell you something. The civil government has usurped the teaching role, and we've allowed them to have it. When the reality is, we ought to be teaching. And I heard you. You said, what? How are we supposed to do that? That's the law of God. In fact, he told them, when they wake up, when they go to bed, when they walk down the lane, when they go through the door, when they go through the gate, when you're with them, teach them about God. I'm going to tell you something. The world isn't stopping. They're teaching about Satan. They're teaching all the evil that they can out there because they want it done, and they're going to do it. That's who Satan is. Well, who are you? Are you for him or are you for Christ? Now, that's the biblical order. Let's talk a minute about governments. Because we're talking about leaders and followers, we understand that there are 4 spheres of government that God instituted, and we're going to list them in the order in which God instituted. Okay? Number 1 is self-government. This was started in the garden, and God said, if you do this, this will be your reward. If you don't do this, this will be your punishment. Okay? Self-government. You are responsible for you. Now listen, any government that comes after this has to agree with that statement of self-government, or it is not a viable government. That's why socialism and communism always fail, because they're not by the design of the laws of God. And when you don't go by the laws of God, it is death and destruction. When you follow the laws of God, it is happiness and prosperity. That's Deuteronomy 30. Now, the interesting thing about that, this is not an experiment. These are facts. They're set down by God. They do not change and will not change until He wipes out the physical world. So we have to understand this, that the first rule, the first sphere of government is self-government. You are responsible for you. And we can see that. God provides all the food, but He doesn't make you eat. He provides the air, but He won't make you breathe. He provides water, He doesn't make you drink. You choose to do that. And you choose everything else. And how the husband provides for the family, protects the family, and how the wife comforts and nurtures, this all is responsible for each person in that self-government. Let me tell you what happens in the family, what should happen in the family. The husband's out there providing for the family. He's fighting against the world. He's got his sword, and he's fighting and fighting and fighting to provide for the family. He turns around and looks back, and there, standing behind him, is his wife saying, "Go get him, honey. I'm with you. I'm for you," and his children around her legs. And that gives him the strength to go on. And when he comes home, she sets the tone for the house. This is for you, because you went out and did this. Let me tell you something. When that all works that way, the children are blessed children and grow up in a normal society. The wife is happy and the husband's happy because they're doing what they are designed to do by God. How sad it is that we have children who are raised in such evil conditions where they grow up and do not know the love in a normal home. And see, when a husband and a wife come together under God and they submit to each other in the way they're supposed to, and they love each other, and then in that coveted, loving relationship, God can place a little child who is in need. And that little child can grow in love, and what a beautiful situation it is. All right, that's the marriage situation, the family government. So notice the family government would not work without self-government. Okay? It has to be designed that way. They work together. And then the next one's the civil government. When God designed the civil government, he did so in Romans 13. He talks about, here are three things the civil government is supposed to do. Number one, protect the innocent. Our civil government's not doing that. In fact, we are murdering more than 1 million innocent children a year. I'm sorry. Here in America alone. Here in America it says, we are for God. We're destroying the most vulnerable, the most innocent among us. And that is the children in the womb. Well, what about the next thing that the civil government is supposed to do? They're supposed to punish the wicked, and we don't do that. In fact, our court system just is really messed up and punishes a lot of good people. In fact, we're taking from those who are working hard and giving it to people who are wicked, who just sit around their front porch and do nothing. We're not making them responsible for what they're supposed to do. We're rewarding the wicked. And then number three, we're supposed to reward the good. Instead, we're punishing it. We're really got it backwards. And the more we go the other way towards what God said, the more prosperous, the more happy, the more loving, the more enjoyable this world will be. You know why you have high crime in certain areas? Because they're not following the laws of God. You know why a government doesn't work? Because it's not following the laws of God. You know why people are poor? Because they're not following the laws of God. You know why people are homeless and hurting, and why people are being beat by their fathers, and why women are getting raped, and so on and so forth? Because the people who are doing those evil things are not following God. What a wonderful world it would be if we all did. Now, the last sphere of government is the church government, in which God set it up. Local churches only, no headquarters, that's against God. No celibacy in clergy, that's against God too. And that's all in 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, and throughout some of the other epistles, some of the things that are designed for the church government. And how we're to submit ourselves as a church under the rule of the elders, because they're going to be for us, because they're submitting to God in order to do what is right in this church government. And guess what? The church government's the one supposed to aid in the teaching, not the civil government. Civil government has no soul. And if you're not actively seeking God, you're actively seeking Satan. So the church is the one who should help in teaching the children. But ultimately it's the parents' responsibility, not the government's. And it's all based upon your own self-government. Now, the family government, which is 1 Corinthians 10, and the civil government, which is Romans 13, and the church government. All of these things are set down by God so that you would know what to do, so that you would know how to do it, and so that you would be able to follow those laws and be happy and prosperous. What is submission? You remember? To make it your mission to be under one you have given permission to be over you in a certain area. So when you give permission for these people in the government, make sure you do it correctly. Well, that's submission. I bet you it's not what you thought it was. It certainly isn't the owning of someone. Take your time and do what is right. Do what is right, because otherwise you're tripping over the truth and it is hurting you. If you were to jump out of a building and you fall to the ground and crash on the ground. You did not break the law of gravity. The law stands. However, you break yourself against the law. Well, that's our lesson for today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.